So I was thinking recently about how there are many film franchises that exist currently. Many that have existed, many that will continue to exist, many that have finished existing or have had their reboots already. So new stuff will happen if those reboots are successful. So in this video, I kind of want to discuss franchises that are deemed like a disgrace to cinema, like they have a distinction of them being not so culturally relevant or artistically relevant, or they're just, oh, dumb film bros like watching these movies because they're for dumb people. It's kind of the avenue of, I don't know, it's enough of an argument for film people who like study film and are huge on art films and whatever to be like, hey, sorry, this shirt's really uncomfortable today. To be like, hey, you know, this isn't The Witch, it's Fast and Furious. It has no meaning or themes or whatever. It's just dumb people with big muscles driving fast cars. Which is a valid opinion, which both general audiences and, of course, film audiences, like film nerds, I don't know what the hell we call ourselves anymore, people who have a somewhat more of a respect for film, I guess. And there was a lot of this consensus for a long time that a lot of these franchises that, you know, just everyone's just like, how the hell do these keep getting made? Who's watching this shit? It's got like 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, whatever the fuck. But there are the odd occasions when you actually take a step back and objectively look at these franchises. So in this case, I'm looking at Fast and Furious and Resident Evil. And I've watched both of these franchises. I've owned both of these franchises on physical media. And I actually really enjoy them. And it's weird because for years I didn't... Like, I watched the Resident Evil films as a kid and I thought that they were fun, goofy shit. I never watched the Fast and Furious films until, like, first or second year of uni because my mate was like, hey, you gotta watch them, they're really cool. You know, it's not just the fact that they're, like, cool because it's fast cars and whatever the fuck, but, like, there's a lot more... There is actual meaning and shit in these movies. Obviously, there's the theme of family, which sure is a meme, but it's really accurate. And it doesn't seem like it's much of a theme, but it's like... Actually, it kind of is. It's like the backbone of the franchise. It's not fast cars, it's family. And the ones that distance themselves from family are the ones that kind of don't really work as well. But that's basically just Too Fast, Too Furious. Like, you could argue Tokyo Drift because it doesn't have anything to do with Vin Diesel's family, but it's like, no, but the family is also the friends you make along the way. So technically, Too Fast, Too Furious still kind of counts. Anyway, so I kind of wanted to look at these franchises, but like there is some kind of maybe a redeeming element to these franchises outside of just thematics and whatever, you know. But maybe it's like, okay, but what film in particular? Maybe there's just one film in the whole entire franchise that actually has a redeeming element. And now, in all fairness, I actually do believe that the Resident Evil films actually do have a redeeming element as well. It sounds like a really stupid thing to say, like, if you're going based on as an adaptation, no, not at all. Don't bother with, like, looking at the original video games and comparing them to the movies. Just don't bother with that shit. It's just an adaptation loosely. Like, oh, we'll take some of the character names or the world and we'll just do our own thing because it's schlocky and it's a Paul W.S. Anderson film. A guy who, like, is strangely creative in the films that he makes, but they can be really, like... A lot of people just don't like them because they're, like, really dumb or whatever. It's really hard to argue as to why they're so good. Because sometimes you just have to get used to them, you know? You have to understand exactly what the film's going for, and kind of when you get into that mindset of, like, this is what the film is trying to achieve, and this is what your expectation is. And if you take your expectation away and just look at the film objectively for what it actually is and how creative in terms of action Paul W.S. Anderson is, you realize... okay, there's something actually here, you know, sure, it's a small avenue, maybe it's just how the expression of genre or the visual kineticism for how it's edited and how the action works and whatever, like, you look at his latest film with Monster Hunter and it's just Tremors, but, you know, it's Tremors and Enemy Mine, like, together, but it's like, hey, what if it's fucking giant goddamn demon creatures? How cool would that be? And that's basically the movie. It's not bad, actually. But, of course, looking at Fast and Furious and Resident Evil, you're also kind of like, okay, let's at least put down that one of these films is actually quite good. At least one of these movies is worth watching, has something that's completely fun, like brings to the table, does something really cool, does something really worth it. Now, with Fast and Furious, you're probably thinking, oh, obviously it's Fast 5. That's the one that kicked it off into being this whole heist thing, and it's got over-the-top stunts and whatever. And yeah, sure, that's arguably one of the best films. In fact, it definitely is one of the best films in the franchise. But I'm actually going to go with my personal favorite here and say Tokyo Drift, which is one that a lot of people despise. I kind of don't know why. I mean, outside of, I guess, it doesn't really have the main characters from the other films. I don't really care. You know, they don't all need to have Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. I'm fine with that. Unless it's Hobbs and Shaw. Fuck that movie. But what Tokyo Drift does is it takes to the film, this franchise, in a different avenue. The first film is a remake of Point Break. It's a heist film. It's crime and cars. You know, that's not too bad. It's a buddy film. You know, it's about family. The second film is just kind of trying to do that again, but worse, and with a worse cast, and a lot less of an interesting film in general. However, Tokyo Drift is like, hey, what if we had a completely different character and put them in a domain that's completely new to them, that they don't understand at all? Now, of course, that's like the classic fish out of water thing, but in this case, it's a guy who loves American muscle, who loves drag racing, but then he's put into Tokyo, where it's like, oh, you can still do that stuff, but it's completely different. And it has a completely different effect, and you have to be able to adapt yourself, otherwise, you know, you don't belong here, and you can't do the one thing that you really love, and you can't, but you also, as a person, cannot leave Tokyo, because if you leave, you'll basically get arrested. So it's like, this guy has a choice. Go back to America, where he will basically go to jail, or stay in Tokyo with his dad, where he goes to school and learns to drift race. And if he doesn't learn to drift race, then he can't do what he loves the most, which is driving fast cars. And so the film has its stakes of, he's really bad at drifting. Like, the film is called Tokyo Drift, and everyone else in Tokyo can drift because it's what they do. It's how their streets are designed, it's how their races are designed. And the whole point is that he can't do it, so his character arc is to do that. He learns how to drift, and it allows him to learn the Japanese culture, to learn how to be with his friends and with his dad, so his family. Family's still the same. And by the end of the movie, he's on good terms with his dad, he's got good new friends, and he knows how to drift, and he's really fucking good at it. To the point of beating the Yakuza boss's son. Sure, cliches, but I love it. You know, it's like, hey, now this the bad guy, also the bad guy, the villain, the opposition, actually also has a character thing, because it's like, fuck, he's like a Yakuza dude, he's a mobster, but like, he's also hot-headed and shit, but he also needs to learn, like, fuck, if I lose the respect of my dad, I'm out. I am out of this place. And like, that's also a really important thing with family, especially in Japan, with respect. So it's still about family. So it still keeps that theme running underneath the currents of it. Like, the main character doesn't have the respect of his dad, but he doesn't respect his dad either. You know, he doesn't have the respect from his community because he can't drag race. He can't drift. So there's like all these different elements that go into his character and the opposition. That's why they've got like a good, like, back-to-back. Like, where one guy, he's better at drifting, he has the babe, but he doesn't have the respect of his dad if he can't do, like, these small tasks, not to mention the fact that he is also, like, basically embezzling money from his dad. So, yeah, that doesn't help. So it gives him more of a criminal edge, which makes you think, yeah, he's definitely the bad guy in this situation because he's also stealing from his dad. So, But yeah, so it seems like a weird thing to say that Tokyo Drift is such a good film, and I really like it. I think it's very fun. I think it has some very comedic moments. I think it's very funny. I think it's very cool. I honestly prefer the character arc of hey, drifting, because drifting allows the character because it's a different thing for the main character. It actually gives him something to compete against in his own field. Because for the most part, it's just, oh, the other two Fast and Furious films by that stage is just who can drive the fastest and hit the NOS at the right time. And that's about it. Like, there's not really much of a challenge there. And that's why the film kind of has that as the backbone of it. Like, oh, drag racing is the backbone, but the forward stuff, the most important, is the relationships between the characters and the crime plot. You know, because it's about the plot. But the cars isn't really important, but it is important at the same time. It's just not really a part of the character arc to drive. I know there is that last race with Dom and Brian, but at the same time, that's just a thing between the two characters. It has nothing to do with the cars. It has nothing to do with making them like better than each other. Realistically, it's just who can just drive faster, which isn't really a very compelling argument. But who can drift better? Someone who can't drift at all, and someone who can drift really fucking well, and then the guy who can't drift well has to learn to be able to drift, and then learn how to drift really well to be able to beat the other guy. You know, it's cool. It's good. It actually utilizes the whole idea of the drag racing and the cars into the plot to involve his character arc. It's good storytelling. So, that's one film that, of course, a lot of people look down on for being the weak link of the franchise. It isn't, clearly. But it's like, it's doing something, you know? It actually focuses on themes and character arcs and journeys and all that kind of shit. It's good. It's a good film. It sounds weird to say that, but it is, and I absolutely adore it. Then, of course, you jump to Resident Evil. And Resident Evil, it's like, okay, but all these films are like dumb zombie films with some creative monsters, let's be fair. And most of them, yes, are based off the video game. All of them are based off the video game. But every single film in this franchise is completely different to the next one. First one takes place in the underground bunker. And it's like a pretty decent horror thriller. The second one is like, hey, now we're in a city. And it's a zombie apocalypse in this city, but it's an against the clock kind of deal. It's, for me, a lot more of a dumb film. I don't like it as much, but it's not bad. It still does something different. Then the third film is like, hey, now it's a complete Mad Max apocalypse. I'm pretty sure the third film is called Apocalypse. Is it actually called Apocalypse? I can't remember. Yeah, so Apocalypse also isn't directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, so like it doesn't have his charm to it, which kind of sucks. He did produce it, but it doesn't have his charm. The third one was Extinction, also not directed by Anderson, but they're all like co-produced, so like he still has some of a hand in it. And probably if he had directed it, it would have had a better style to it. But that one's just, they were all just chilling in the desert because, yeah. It just kind of is. Even there's an Easter egg in Letterboxd saying, and hello to Jason Isaacs. Interesting. The fourth film is Afterlife. Afterlife is like, the franchise is like, okay, now we're in a tower. We got to get to a ship. So like the whole, actually it's like them leading to, did they get to the tower first or? Yeah, I think so, yeah. This film is like, for me, it's got all these great pockets of great action sequences and fun character stuff, but between there, it has a lot of dull moments, like, it's dull, but then really good, but then dull, but then really good, but then dull. Like, it knows what it is, and it hits that peak every couple of minutes. But for the most part, it's just pretty meh, but not terrible. And then you get to, I will just know for the most part, the final chapter. I personally don't like the final chapter. Even my mate suggested I should rewatch it because he actually thinks it's pretty good. I don't like it personally. I don't like how it's edited. I think it's really messy. Sure, again, it's also a completely different thing of like, it's the end of the apocalypse, and it's like, now we've got to conclude it all and whatever. So each film is still very different to the last film, which is at least unique for the franchise. But the best one, and a very superior film, is Resident Evil Retribution. This is a film where it's like, okay, here's a banger of an idea of how about, you know how cool the previous films were with all these different settings? Well, now you've got, like, what is it, New York and Tokyo and whatever. I think Paris is the other, no, Russia. And it's like, what if we grabbed all these different places? Maybe it's not New York, it's like suburbia. I think they've got a New York part to it. But it's basically like, what if the Resident Evil cast went into a simulation and they had to fight zombies in a simulation, but each simulation has different types of zombies. And it's all to get to the end point where they break out of the simulation and leave. And it sounds really dumb, but that's what's so great about it. It's like, hey, for the most part, the simulations are fucking cool. Like, it sounds like it's all digital and like, it's like, no, these are like real simulations with real zombies and shit. And like, people have to face different zombies in different towns, whether they're just regular zombies, which gives you creative action scenes. You've got the giant licker, who's fucking banger in this film. I absolutely adore when that guy shows up in Russia and in the final sequence. Not the final sequence, but the sequence before the whole place blows up. And even the final fight scene is like really over the top and just beautifully done. It's one of those films where it's like, it does everything that it needs to do so perfectly. Like, it starts off with, hey, this is Alice, and she's a mother, and you got the guy from The Mummy, and he's her husband, and she's got a daughter, and then, oh my god, zombie apocalypse breaks out, and it's Dawn of the Dead. Oh no, is she gonna survive? And she probably doesn't. And the whole point of it is that, again, that's outside of being a great reference to Dawn of the Dead, it's like, how about we try something else different? Where it's like, we've got a simulation, so each simulation, again, like, it's just moving your characters into different settings every, like, 20 minutes. But it's not just that. It's not like they're all combined. It's like, you got two characters in one part, you got another group of characters in another part. Eventually, they'll converge to meet each other and try to get the fuck out of there. It's just consistently different. Each part is just a consistently moving piece. It's just so fun. Like, it takes the franchise and is like, you know how the previous film had a lot of fun elements to it? How about we just, like, ramp that up to a fucking 10? You know, to an 11. It's a lot harder to actually argue why the Resident Evil Retribution is such a good film, but it's one of those films that you gotta just watch it. Like, expect your mind to just be blown for just how crazy this shit gets. And it is very over the top. It kind of still has the dumb sensibilities of most PWS Anderson films. And it's like, I get that, you know? But even when I first watched it, I'm just like, this film is just amazing. Like, I was pretty for the rest of the franchise by this stage. Like, I liked the first film, I didn't like the second. The third film was kind of boring, but at least it was like, hey, they're just kind of stuck in this desert apocalypse. But then the next film was like, hey, now they're stuck in this city apocalypse. And it's like, it has some great action set pieces, and they've got some good big monster creatures and shit, and they also bring a lot of them back into the fifth film. So it's, I don't know, it's just fun. You don't need to, like, re-explain who all these characters, I mean, they'll obviously still re-explain who a lot of these characters are, but you don't need to introduce anyone new outside of her daughter. You know, everyone basically in the film has been in the previous films, outside of maybe 2 or 3 people. Is it Ada Wong in this one? Yeah, she's in this one. She's great. So it's just like, there's all this random ass shit. It's just fun. They bring back people who are dead because they're all clones. Yeah, that's how insane it gets. They're all clones now. So it's one of those things of, you look at these films, and you could say the same thing about slasher franchises. Something like Friday the 13th, for example, like, is a franchise a lot of people look very down on. Like, oh, it's just dumb slasher, hack and slash, one big dude just goes around killing half-naked teenagers. And yes, it's true. That's exactly what happens, but it's fun as shit. And, of course, the obvious one to say, oh, the banger of that franchise is Jason Lives. And it's like, yeah, it has a tongue-in-cheek nature, and it's fun. And to be fair, I absolutely adore it. But I personally think the best one is the final chapter. The final chapter is like, hey, the third film was like, we've kind of, well, I mean, to be fair, the first film's pretty dull. The second film actually does something really interesting. It's fun. It has some great kills to it. The second one's really surprisingly underrated. The third film, I think, is overrated. I think it does give you the iconography of his mask and everything, but the 3D element really ruins the film. And it just makes it really cheesy. But then it's like, hey, how about if we combine like the creative kills of the second film with the iconography of the third film and put them into the fourth film, and it's every kill is cool as shit. It all looks great. It's so fun to watch. And the final chapter is just an amazing film in terms of slasher history. It's just so fucking great. Obviously, Jason lives, they resurrect him, and even to be fair, a chapter, is it? No, I think it's called A New Chapter. A New Beginning. Not as bad. Me and my mates had rewatched that, and we were like, it's not terrible. It's basically just a kill every few minutes. But like the plot wise is just dull, like the characters aren't as interesting. So obviously the final chapter has that benefit of it being really, like, has some fun characters. Even the people who die are pretty fun, which is kind of what Friday Part 2 has. But even like a lot of people like look at that franchise and like, oh, this all looks so dumb, it's all so stupid. It's like my least favorite of the franchise is the first one. I haven't seen Jason Dies? What the fuck is that one called? The Final Friday. I haven't seen The Final Friday yet. I don't plan to. I have the Blu-ray. I'm not going to watch it yet. Probably not ever. But like, I've seen all these films, and I'm like, even something like Jason X, which is really tongue-in-cheek cheesy, but fuck it, Uber Jason is cool as hell. Not to mention, Jason Takes Manhattan is a film that like a lot of people hate in the franchise. It's like, it gives so much promise. It's Jason who's going to Manhattan. But then he's on a boat for like the first hour of the film. And now, to be fair, it's like basically a remake of Alien. It's on a steamboat going to the city, and Jason's on board. So he's been taken from Camp Crystal Lake, and he's going to Manhattan, and on the journey, he's going to kill as many people on this boat as possible, and then when they get off the boat, they're like, fuck, Jason's on the ship, we need to get out of here, and then he chases them through the streets of Manhattan until they just, like, one of the characters is a boxer, and tries to punch the crap out of Jason, and Jason whacks his head off. You know, it sounds really dumb, but the final act is all in Manhattan, and of course ends in the sewer where they wash him to pieces. I think they like use the like toxic waste sewage to like turn him into a child again. It's really weird. It doesn't matter. It's kind of a dumb ending, but it's still pretty good film. So it's just one of those things of like, you can look at these franchises and be like, sure, they're pretty dumb, but it's also the element of like how fun they are. Like the same argument can be made for shit like Star Wars and James Bond and whatever. They have their avenues as to, if you can look at it more objectively, as to how this as a film works, how it as a franchise works. And you can kind of realize that, to some degree, a lot of these films, a lot of these franchises actually have a lot of merits to them. Like, of course, a lot of people will just have their main enjoyabilities. Like, a lot of people like Harry Potter, for example, and a lot of people think Harry Potter is so dumb and stupid. Personally, I really like Harry Potter. I grew up on it, so I've got the nostalgia aspect, but even if I was to rewatch it, I'd probably say there's at least 2 to 3 good films in that franchise, with the obvious great one being the third film. You know, so it's like, every franchise has this element to them, and a lot of people are going to have their perspective on how you look at stuff. And I even did an interview recently where the person I was interviewing said, like, oh, it might be controversial to say this, but I really like Mad Max Fury Road. I'm like, what? How is that controversial? It's a fucking banger. It's a great film. It's a fucking masterpiece. It's an action masterpiece, and just everything about it is amazing. But, like, the controversy that she was talking about was how audiences were like, oh, this is stupid, they've made Max a weakling, he's like not even the main character, it's this woman, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, because he just stumbles into her life and just happens to be on the journey, like he's forced into her story. And that's what's so interesting, that like that's one of the things that makes it more interesting as a Mad Max story. Hey, what if Mad Max wasn't the main character and was forced into someone else's story, and their story happened to be really fucking awesome? There you go, you know? So sometimes you just got to take your own perspective on a film and be like, obviously a lot of people are going to shove their opinions in your face and be like, Friday the 13th is dumb, it's just dumb slasher films, or, you know, Fast and Furious is dumb, it's just big muscle men driving cars. I'm like, yes, but... And then you watch them and you're like, oh wait, they're really fun. Dumb, sure, but sometimes dumb can be fun. And sometimes that's just how you gotta look at it. It's dumb can be fun. Or maybe it's just fun. You know, maybe in your mind it's not dumb at all. You know? I still think the Resident Evil films are dumb as shit, but I love them. They're absolutely fun to watch. Whereas Fast and Furious at least has some more merit to it. And sure, it's still dumb, overly dumb blockbusters and whatever. I'm like, fuck that. I'd much prefer to watch that kind of a blockbuster than to watch another goddamn Marvel movie. Because at least all these have a start and an end and have a character journey for the film. And no matter what kind of bullshit they bring up, like John Cena is fucking Vin Diesel's brother and whatever, at least it's still fun, you know? And they do something creative with it. So, nevertheless, I think just the overall is just... maybe take a step back and look at the thing objectively and realize that maybe there is more to this than meets the eye. Some stuff is really fucking stupid though, but again, that's just a subjective thing. Anyway, that's all for now. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Adios. Also, what franchises and films do you think are like a franchise that's considered really dumb, but at least one of them is an absolute banger? You know, which ones do you have like that? Again, I've listed mine. Now it's time to list yours. See you then.